welcome everyone. We're glad to have everyone here on Thursday, get started with some fun music and start everyone out today. As you know, today we're having an awesome masterclass by Buzzy Rocket, AI marketing shortcuts, how smart founders get traction fast. Just a note about today, we're going to have a presentation followed by Q&A, and we'll also have some poll questions throughout the presentation um, just for participation from you. And we'll share those results too, so everyone can kind of see where the crowd is at. We are recording this meeting, so we'll be sharing it with you after in case you miss any of it or want to go back to any of it. And we'll also make sure that you have an introduction to Debbie and Victoria, who are hosting the masterclass today. Just please note that the chat for the masterclass is not for networking today. It is only for comments and questions directed towards the masterclass presentation. Like I mentioned, we'll be doing a Q&A following the presentation. So if you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll make sure to read them afterwards. And with that, we will get started. So I will turn the time over to Debbie Klein, who is the founder and chief of customer success, and Victoria Collins, who is the co-founder of Buzzy Rocket. I'll turn it over to you guys.
Excellent. Thank you, Skylar. Welcome, everyone. As Skylar said, I'm Victoria. Debbie is also on as well. We're the co-founders of Buzzy Rocket. Just quick 2-second, spiel about us. We're startup marketing specialists. We've been doing this for over 14 years. We've actually helped, I know the screen says 100, it's actually closer to 140 startups. But yeah, we're very, very passionate about the space. Prior to funding Buzzy Rocket, I actually founded a technology company in Northern Virginia and raised 34 million. So I'm, for the founders who are on this call, I totally understand where you're coming from. So excited to get started. All right. So, as I just said, founders, especially if you're in an early stage startup, you're probably doing it all. You probably don't want to be doing it all. You probably think you need to be doing it all. And unfortunately, that's kind of the problem, right? And that kind of brings us to where we are today, and probably why you're on this call, interested about, why AI can help you and how you can get these shortcuts to help with your marketing. So before we jump in, let's do a quick poll question. What's the biggest thing right now, in your opinion, holding your marketing back?
And we'll leave this up for just about a minute to give everyone a chance to answer.
Excuse me. All right, excellent. Okay, lack of time, strategy. Wow. Okay, consistency. This completely aligns with what we hear with a lot of founders, especially the ones we work with. Time. I think time is probably the most valuable thing on earth. But then you run out of time, or you end up wasting time if you don't have a strategy. And then, in my opinion, consistency can be one of the biggest killers, momentum killers rather, because you try it, maybe it doesn't work, and then you don't have time to go back to it. So this completely aligns. Thank you for that. No, hold on 1 second. Gotta move you guys. Zoom is playing games with me. All right. So I think everyone probably on this call already knows that, AI is an accelerant, right? It's helping you move faster. But the reality is, if you don't know where you're going, you're going to end up in this time suck, essentially trying to figure out what AI tools you should be using. And every day it's a very exciting time. It's a confusing time too, because I think every day there's a new AI tool, or probably 2,500 AI tools that pop up. So, the reality, even though it's exciting, even though sometimes it feels cutting edge, you might see an ad for something that you've never seen before and you start playing with it. The reality is everyone, including your competitors, have access to AI. And the reality is, because you're kind of piecemeal, maybe interacting with the AI, you probably don't have a plan, right? You're not saying, hey, this is a problem we need to tackle. Here are the 5 solutions. Let's evaluate it. You might be, thinking about something. You see, like I said, an ad, or you hear somebody say, oh, did you know this? And then you kind of go down this rat hole of, trying to figure out what's going to help, what's not going to help. So a plan is key to kind of, avoid that time suck. And, they give you a shortcut, but again, strategy gives you direction. So today we're going to really talk about, what those shortcuts are, but at the same time, I think it's important to keep in the back of your mind, don't get sucked into the shiny object. You want to really, really focus on what do I need that's going to help me reach my business goals faster. So with that said, I know you guys, felt like you just did a poll question, but let's do another one. So how are you using AI right now in your marketing? If you are, and if you're not, that's totally fine. All right, excellent. Um, all right, so a lot of people not using AI. All right, very interesting. Or using 1 or 2 tools completely makes sense. I do love the answer that AI writes designs, thinks for me. I'd love AI to do my laundry too, personally, but that's just my own. All right, excellent. So, all right, this could be a great crowd. So if you feel like we're going a little too fast, let us know. There will be time for questions after the fact. But again, please, stop us if we're moving too fast. So today, the shortcuts we're going to cover are going to address audience intel, messaging, content creation, automation, personalization, analytics, and feedback. And this is just kind of a little bite of how AI can help with your marketing. And all of the tools we're going to kind of walk through and show you are really our tools that we have used with our clients. And again, these are not an exhaustive list of tools because every day there are tens of thousands, I feel like, more that are coming out. But the reality is, these are things we've tried and they've worked. And so if you are looking to save a little bit of time, dip your toe into AI, these are great places to start. All right, audience intel. So finding out what your audience really, really cares about. So, you know, it's really crazy because, you come up with a solution or a product as a founder and you have an idea who that target audience is. And ideally, you've taken a little bit of time then to explore that, and you really feel good that this is your target market. Target markets are huge. It's a big foundational piece because if your product solution doesn't solve a problem for them, then you're going to feel very deflated and you're going to feel like your product or service is not um, game changing and or is going to make a difference. So audience intel is kind of a key piece of that once you've kind of locked down your target market. So gummy search, we'll go through each of these. So gummy search is a pretty exciting tool. It does a lot of analysis on Reddit specifically. So, when you're going through trying to understand maybe the pain points of that target audience, it's an excellent accelerant to get that information to you. And something I should say before we go too deep in this, these are not in any kind of sequential order. These are all kind of tools as part of a tool set, like literally thinking of like a hammer and a screwdriver, right? They serve different purposes. Some might have a little bit of an overlap, but we're not saying, you just pick one of these. We're also not saying you need to do these in any kind of order. So just so you kind of know that going into it. SparkToro, interesting as well. It's actually giving you information about what your audience is reading, listening, following. And that's really, really important because, again, once you know your target audience and you know what they're doing, that's where the intersection kind of comes from a marketing perspective, right? Because you want to be in the same places that your audience is. Relevance AI, that's using machine learning to look at customer feedback. So again, you're looking from a different direction at this audience intel. And then Sprig is doing something a little bit different, but semi-similar in terms of analyzing that user feedback, behavior, and really guiding you to, making marketing decisions. All right, so that was audience intel. Messaging. Um, Messaging is really, really important. And I feel like it's one of the things that a lot of founders either skim over, or they feel like they can nail that and just move on. And it's a trap. It's a tar trap that you can get stuck in sometimes because your messaging, and you also have to understand your audience, right, for messaging. So if you're messaging to an investor, that message is going to be very, very different than if you're messaging to your consumer base, or potential people who will be purchasing your product or service. So, kind of laying those foundational elements out is key. So once you've kind of set that foundation, you feel very, very good about, those kind of that framework. That's when these tools come into play. So Claude, we'll look at, the conversational language. A lot of these tools, for example, Claude, Copy AI, and Writer, those will all help you with that consistency. So when you have the framework, when you have this key message, when you know you want to say something out to this audience, making sure that you are being consistent, through whether it's a newsletter, whether it's email outreach, whether it's social media, whether it is your advertising and your website, right? We want to keep that line of consistency all the way through. Claude, Copy AI, Writer are going to provide those tools for you to do that. And you can train them, right? You can be able to provide that framework. You can help them to understand, and then they'll create that output, which is a huge time saver, again, if done correctly. Story Tagger does a really interesting thing. So it allows you to kind of get feedback from your consumer base or for your clients rather, and you get to actually can turn those real stories into a marketing narrative, because there's nothing more powerful than finding out how your actual customers are using your product or service and what they find to be the most valuable thing. You might have 25 different things that are interesting or you find to be cool about your product or service or your startup, but the reality is the client might just hone in on one very specific thing, and that might be something that touches a lot of other potential clients, and that kind of brings that into the brand. So again, very, very powerful tools. Now, here's an example of where messaging can go wrong. AI can go wrong, right? If you use the tools, because garbage in is garbage out, right? I think that, I don't know if a lot of people have played with Canva or they're familiar with Canva on the call, but Canva does a great thing in terms of helping you get to kind of a graphic design, to get a graphic design feel without a graphic designer. However, again, everybody has access to these tools. So if you're using a template, right? And we just made 3 examples here. So we had AI actually write the language, and we, had AI write the language. We use the same template. You could be using the same template as your competitors, right? So you have to make sure that you are differentiating yourself, that you understand that message. So that way, then you can use these tools to not look like everyone else or create an overly generic message. Revolutionize the way we work, protect your digital future. These are very generic. There's buzzwords, state of the art, discover the future. And so you want to be very, very careful that you're not just, you feel good. You're like, wow, this could be an ad or a social post. But at the end of the day, it's not anything special. It's not going to make anything memorable. And it's definitely not going to make your clients potentially fall in love with you. So that takes us to the next one, content creation. So, again, your audience, we have the target audience, we have the messaging, right? We have the key messaging there. Now we need to produce content. And everybody, I think, knows, even going back to, even when you were in grade school, content can be a huge time suck. I don't know a ton of people who were super excited about writing a college paper or, a high school paper or anything else. They're like, I can't wait to get home and write this paper. Same thing, in the business world, in the startup world. So, Gamma's helping with the presentation decks. Cast Magic is actually helping with your podcasts, your summaries, your posts. Opus Clip is actually helping you turn long form content. So, if you have a video interview that's 5 minutes, into smaller editable chunks without the need of a full, editing team. And Narado, they do something very similar, but they're looking at more image generation, some publishing tools, some content creation there as well. And I think one of the biggest things, and I should have mentioned this earlier, that the exciting part, I think, as a founder and somebody who's passionate about the startup space, is AI gives us the access to have enterprise level tools or much bigger teams that in the past we never ever could afford. And so that's again a very, very exciting, almost equalizer for the startup community. All right, automation and personalization. It's interesting. This has been around for a while. A lot of different companies have been trying to figure out, how do they kind of master this? And again, AI has just kind of pushed everything into the future. So, these tools listed here do a variety of things, to whether they're automating very specific tasks, helping you if you have a very convoluted lead funnel, if you have different forms coming in, different types of information, for example, like Levity. If you oh wow, wait a second, let me take a step back. So Levity and Make, they're actually very interesting because you don't need a developer, you don't need code to do that automation, where in the past that was something you had to do. And, but again, going backwards here, Smart Lead AI, that's doing the cold email, but making it a little bit more interesting in terms of the personalization, the follow-up, making sure delivery and engagement are key. There's a ton of cold email out there. There's a lot of things going to spam, so they're kind of leading the way to kind of make sure your messages are ending up in their inboxes. And then there's Clay. So Clay is actually doing something a little bit different. It's actually enriching your contact data, building out that a little bit. So that way, then you can go into that automated sales process. All right, analytics and feedback. This is one of my personal areas that I love, because, you can't improve what you don't measure. And unfortunately, there's so much data available that I feel like a lot of companies still get into the analysis paralysis, conundrum rather, where you're so overwhelmed with data, or you don't know what to measure, or you don't know what it means, that it actually turns into a distraction versus turning into direction. So each of these tools below, Browse AI, it's looking at your competitor websites, it's looking at their content. So instead of you having to, kind of manually go through and see what are they doing, what are they offering, what have they changed, you can actually, make that an actual task. You can go to their site, put in your information, put in your competitors, and they will send that to you. So you can kind of keep your hand on the heartbeat of what your competitors are doing without wasting time. Polymer, it helps you transform the smart sheets, or spreadsheets rather, into searchable dashboards. Again, so much data you're pulling through, that when you can pull it all together without the need of an analyst rather, you're saving a ton of time. Metabase, clear, customizable dashboards. You can visualize that again without a data team. Now, Hotjar is much more focused just kind of on your website. So, but it's taking, we've done eye tracking and heat maps for years, but it's actually taking it to a different level. So you can improve that, spotting those friction points and getting people to kind of pull through. So these are a lot of tools. This is a lot of information. Where do you go from here? What do you do? Um, Again, as I said, AI is just so much more inexpensive than the tools we had to use in the past. So, choose one shortcut to test. These tools, a lot of them have free trials. Some of them are, under $100 a month, much less than that to kind of get started. Try it, play with it. Just take one shortcut, take an automate something that's draining your time. So delegate that time draining task to the shortcut you planned, and then take the time that you're getting back in your day and use that toward your business goals, right? So whether it's you're talking to customers, you need to be out there with the sales team, or you are the sales team, or if you're actually, actively fundraising, which I think the majority of our startups know that we're always kind of fundraising on some level. So if there's an investor focused activity you could be spending that time with, go and do it. That's definitely key. All right, another poll question, reality check. So, do you plan to test anything that we've shared? And by the way, at the end of this presentation, we will give you a quick QR code. You can scan it, throw in your email address on that landing page, and we'll actually shoot you out an email with all of the links to these so you don't have to hunt around, unless you're already Googling them, and that's fine too. Yes, I'm already on one of their websites. All right, awesome. That's exciting. That's exciting. I think that means something caught your eye and you're like, I could totally use that. Being nervous that's okay. There's nothing. The good thing is you can kind of explore these tools, in the privacy of your own home or your office, and you can, kind of figure it out. If you have questions, we love to help. We totally understand. And it's interesting for people who said they didn't have time to begin with at the beginning. You're actually saying you do have time to actually do this. So fantastic. That makes me very happy. Um, Taking a little bit of a step back there, shortcuts, again, AI, accelerators, shortcuts, but they're not strategy. So you will drive yourself crazy, going down to all these sites, signing up, starting to play, abandoning them, if you don't have that plan, right? So what is that overarching plan that is guiding your startup to hit those business goals? Lay that plan out first and then say, great, now, okay, we need to be able to do XYZ from a content creation perspective. We need to understand, ABC from an audience intel perspective. What is the data telling us? Okay, that's where we can plug in this tool. And again, every tool that we showed on this presentation and have discussed so far aren't going to be perfect fits necessarily with your strategy, but it's important that that strategy is laid down. Otherwise, you could just play with AI tools all day long. And, I'm sure there's somebody somewhere that wants to do that. Um, but, at the end of the day, if these marketing tasks are literally eating into your day, that's when that kind of is an indicator that you maybe don't have a strong plan or you do need strategic help. So, if you find yourself spinning or you're like, I tried this one and it didn't work. And again, some of these tools, a lot of these tools are continuing to improve. Technology is continuing to improve. Do we think any single tool we've shared is perfect at doing what it does? Should you blindly lead it? Of course not. You shouldn't just lead what they're telling you, but it's a great, great place to, again, accelerate those time draining tasks and move closer to your actual business objectives. All right, so with that said, here's that QR code I mentioned. scan it, again, put in your information, get the URLs, keep them, use them. Debbie and I's contact information is below. We're more than happy to, schedule a quick call, kind of talk through, what you're kind of struggling with, why you might be hesitant to try AI or to try some of these tools, or what could potentially be a fit for you. So we love talking to smart people. I believe Debbie, our Calendly is on that link. I'm not 100% sure, but it should be, if it's not on the link, then it's on the page. So
Awesome.
excellent.
Thanks so much,
So
Victoria and Debbie. Yeah, we
yeah,
can move into
thank
Q&A
you.
if that works.
Excellent. That sounds great.
So we do have for a few questions in the chat. So the first one is a question about the carbon emissions with green AI and the use of AI. Do you have any insight on that?
Carbon emissions and the use of AI.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if there's any
I can,
additional question. If there's sorry, go ahead, Debbie.
yeah, that's okay. This is a hot topic, I guess, in the sense of a lot of people are going through like, well, using AI is using so much power and data centers and this and that and like the carbon, and there's a
Got it,
huge
got it, got
amount
it, got it.
around it. So I think we can definitely share some articles or have a call to talk about that. That's like a whole nother separate masterclass, I think, to talk about kind of perceptions and how to mitigate that.
Definitely. Do you have any recommendations for how to get that better or special copy with AI?
To get better copy. So great question. So and I'm assuming from a copy, we're talking about, we don't want to sound robotic. We don't want to sound generic, with the
Yes,
examples
that
that we
sounds about
kind of
right.
shared. Perfect. So, again, having that strong messaging foundation is really, really key. And in the startup space, we're taught that our solutions are supposed to be, especially when we're pitching to investors, right? They are these big things. They solve all problems. And unfortunately, when you start translating that into messaging, it turns into this very generic messaging. So the way to avoid that is to take a step back, look at your target audience, get very, very focused on the problem that you solve it for one, solve it for two. I know that if you've ever sat in any startup webinar or masterclass, you've probably heard this, but go really, really tight, go really, really narrow, address that actual problem, put it into a messaging framework. Who are you targeting? Why are you different? What makes you unique? If you can start with those inputs, that's one. And then two is, what is your brand? What is your brand personality? If your brand was a celebrity, who would they be? What kind of show would they watch? Kind of build out a whole persona about your brand. And then when you kind of combine the two, you can give those inputs to AI, and basically it can help you start, creating that tone, but keeping that differentiation. And that's what you want it to do in order to not, you can't just, I wish you could. I mean, you can, but you shouldn't. You can go to, ChatGPT or something and say, great, write me a blog, make me a website, write me an email. But it's probably going to miss out on a lot of the magic that you've actually spent the time and energy creating in your startup. So don't, I would highly recommend not doing that and putting it out there, but there is a way to do it.
Yeah, one sort of semi-practical way to think about it is if you have thoughts and ideas, almost like as if you were dictating or just talking, like you can, if you start back to the garbage in, garbage out, if you start with your own ideas, no matter how ugly and messy they might be, and use AI as an iterative tool to be like, oh, it came up with this, but now I can layer in a personal story or talk about, and then keep iterating through. Don't just write in there, write me a blog about this, and then hit publish.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Next
Excellent.
question is, where do these tools stand on data policy? Do all these use our data and inputs for training their AI, or depends on the tool and pricing tier, specifically asking for free or trial version while testing?
So that's a really, really great question. And that varies honestly from tool to tool. And I would honestly read their terms and conditions and read their FAQs and ask their help, contact us or their chat boxes, for those questions, because some are a little bit more, some are using it, some are using it just like Google uses, for example, your search and everything else to try to improve the algorithm. They might be making small things. Some AI tools will index your conversations if you aren't careful, and then they become searchable out to the world, which is kind of embarrassing. So yeah, definitely data. It's a great question. Unfortunately, there's not a blanket answer, because it does change so much. But any tool that you look at, it's a fair thing to go and investigate in their terms and conditions. And if you're unsure and you don't like how it feels, go to another one.
Okay, great. Do you feel like cold call and emails are still effective?
It's a great question, and this is where this is
I think
trend.
I
Victoria
think
might have
she froze. Oh, no, you're
froze.
back. Go ahead. You
Oh, she's
froze. We
back.
couldn't hear you.
Sorry, I'll start over. You really kind of get into an ebb and flow when it comes to that, in terms of cold calls and cold emails. And it also depends on your audience, and it depends on how much your competitors are using it, right? And that's why I said there's an ebb and flow. Cold emails became like super trendy a few years ago, and then everybody was doing it. And I know, as a marketer, being marketed to as a marketer, I think every other email I was getting was cold email. And so I just completely ignored it. I found it to be not useful at all. Now we have some clients that are very, very niche clients, and cold email continues to be a game changer for them. But again, if you're not hitting that right audience, if the message isn't right, and again, if your competition, depending on what they're doing, those are all big variables you have to consider. The other thing that is my personal like marketing favorite is paying attention to, whatever your marketplace is. If everybody's doing cold emails, is there an opportunity to go back and do direct mail, for example? Because back in the day, and I'm dating myself, you used to get 50 pieces of direct mail that would all go into the trash. But so now, if cold email is the modern day direct mail and nobody's getting any physical mail, perhaps it makes more sense to send them something, right? Because again, at the end of the day, the marketing, the channels, it's really breaking through that clutter. So, how are we really connecting with that audience? How are we getting them to notice us, in a land where we are just continuing to be inundated with information? How do we get our solution or product there? Look for the places where there's not, where no one else is there, right? Be able to kind of bridge that gap. So that's kind of
Yeah,
a long
another
answer to a short question.
another to further extend the length of the answer, um, if I bring it back to AI, if you are using different tools, say you're using an AI tool to go out there and find people in your target market, then you're using an AI tool to send them emails, and then you're using, you can be in very dangerous territory very quickly in that you're now spending time and money on things that may or may not be the right message. It might not be the right market, and you can compound errors. So each of these tools are great, but once that is also part of what contributes to people no longer trusting email the way they used to. Um, and on the cold calling, use your own experience, right? How often do you pick up the phone with the spam alert on it? However, cold calling still has its place. And if you are going to cold call, you've got maybe 3 seconds. So don't
Mhm.
start with, "Hi, am I talking to the person in charge of?"
Yeah, you want to be right. You want to be reaching that direct person, right, who actually needs that. And those are great points, Debbie. That's really great points. And I think it's a little bit of old school, but we're a little bit of old school some days too, in that we do like to talk to live people. So we need that live validation. We do need, yes, this is the right audience. Yes, this is a problem I have. Yes, okay, great. to Debbie's point, before we can start automating, before we can start scaling, so we don't have that compound error.
Okay, awesome. The next question that it says, I'm hopeful you will show us some step-by-step scenarios employing AI to achieve something like automating a particular process, but maybe you can just kind of walk us through what that would be like, some sort of step-by-step scenario using AI to achieve something or automating a process for you.
Sure. And this might be a great thing to kind of take offline. And it's kind of funny you said that because almost, oh my goodness, I think it's a little more than 2 years ago, we actually did a master class where we kind of built and whole ad campaign with AI. And it was interesting, but the reason we didn't do it on this presentation is because the level of sophistication that has occurred since then is pretty great. And so, depending on that tool, depending on that data set, or depending on what you're trying to get from the tool, it can get very. This would have been like a 7-hour masterclass, and not in a bad way, because you do want to get some of this stuff set up. But again, there are a lot of different steps, and every tool is just a little bit different. So unfortunately, there's not like an easy way to kind of raise that up and say, step one, I mean, I guess you could say step one, identify the tool, step two, sign up for it. But some of them are
Yeah.
going to be a lot faster, some are going to be a lot slower.
And I
But
think
please
if
reach
you're
out
thinking
to
of
ask
a
that question, because
process,
we can definitely discuss it.
yeah, and I think if you're thinking of a process, like for example, a little bit what I just spoke about, um, assuming you already have a message, for example, and you already have a brand, and you're just trying to figure out like, how do I find people to email to and how do I email? Like, in that case, basically, if you think of an AI technology like tool stack, you're going to kind of pick and choose which ones would help you through that. So you might pick one that is listening to I can't remember if it was Gummy or which, that's listening to like the Reddit threads and
Reddit.
being like,
Yep.
oh, this is what people are talking about. So this is the topic that I want to then use this tool to write some content about. And then, so for each particular process, and we're happy to help you go through and whatever processes you want to start with offline, we're no problem. We're happy to help with that.
Perfect. Next question is for early stage founders, what CRM or databases do you recommend? As a rule of thumb, how much should early stage founders be spending on AI tools? It's kind of a three-part question, so we can go one by one. But so the first question is, yeah, what CRM or database would you recommend for early stage founders?
I feel a little bad kind of going back to this answer, but it does differ based on your industry. And it does differ based on the types of clients or customers you're trying to attract. So again, if that person wants to follow up with us directly, if they can provide a little bit more information about their type of business, we're happy to point you in the right direction. Skylar, what was the second part of that question?
Well, before
Yeah,
you
so
move on,
yeah,
Victoria, the other um, things you would think through are what type of funding you have, how many people in your company. So if you're like, hey,
Well, that's
I'm a
for the money amount. Yeah.
no, I mean for when you're choosing a CRM also, because like if you're like, hey, we have whatever, $1,000 and an idea, you might want to use a free CRM tool. If you have 100 people in a robust client base and a little bit of a budget, you're going to choose. So even unrelated to all those other things Victoria spoke about, there's the good news is there are tools ranging from free to like Salesforce and HubSpot type ones and everywhere in between. So, like Victoria said, feel free to reach out and we can give you some more specific guidance on which might be the best fit for you.
Yeah. So Skylar, I think I heard money, how much should startups be spending? And
on
again,
AI tools. Yeah, that's right.
yeah, and I think that so it kind of depends also on your founder's expertise, right? If you're all very technical, if one of you is technical and one of you comes from a marketing background, it's kind of looking at what are the gaps you're trying to fill. again, when you look at that kind of master plan or strategy, okay, here are these different things we need. If we're just talking about marketing, and again, this goes back a little bit to what Debbie was saying, depending on that target audience, depending on, how much you've raised, how much you haven't, what your current burn rate is outside of marketing, you're gonna kind of adjust that. The reason why I was getting excited about the idea that this is more of a leveling playing field for startups is because, you could get access to the majority of these tools, like I said, for less than $100 a month. And if they align with your plan and you're able to create X progress, right, for let's say less than $1,000 a month, and that's going to get you closer to your business goal. Or, you could spend $2,000 a month and it's going to get you to your business goal 5x faster. And that's great because you don't have a ton of runway. All those things are factors when determining how much to spend. There's not like if you're spending more than $1,000 a month, you need to go to AI rehab or something. That's definitely not what we're trying to say. So unfortunately, it is. But again, if you have a concept of what your budget is, what your burn rate is, what you're trying to achieve either before your next raise, or if there's a revenue target you're trying to get to, so hopefully you don't have to raise any more money, all of those things are going to kind of come into play.
Okay, awesome. And then the third part to that question was, what are your thoughts on LinkedIn Sales Navigator's effectiveness?
So interesting question. So LinkedIn is trying really, really, really hard to monetize their community, for lack of a better saying. And I think they're a little slow to the game in general of doing that. They've had a lot of different leadership changes, and that's a different thing in itself. But they're playing with their algorithm, they're playing with some of these tools. The sales navigator of today wasn't the same sales navigator of yesterday. So it's a hard thing to say. We've had some success with Sales Navigator. And again, it depends on who that target is. If you have a targeted audience for your product that's blue collar, that perhaps is not tech friendly or savvy, and so maybe they're not on LinkedIn, Sales Navigator is not going to do anything for you. I think Sales Navigator, honestly, even compared to their advertising, I think Sales Navigator is probably one of their stronger tools. There are other tools that will go in, I think like LinkedIn Helper. There's a few different outside of LinkedIn tools that are actually used to mine and to kind of mimic what Navigator does to a degree. But again, as it can kind of continues to evolve, and I can't tell you off the top of my head what the price was, but I feel like at one point Sales Navigator was relatively expensive. So, if it's not relatively expensive and if your target audience is there, it can be a really, really great tool to reach them.
Okay, awesome. And I know we do have a few more questions about right platforms for small business and all these things. And to those, I would suggest reaching out to Debbie and Victoria individually so that you can kind of discuss with them your exact business and needs, and they can help direct you to the right platform and CRMs.
Yeah, and if you email us, if you can just provide a little bit more, I totally appreciate if you're in stealth mode, but if you can just, share a little bit more information about, here's what we're doing, here's what we're trying to achieve, we can get back to you with that. If you want to have a live conversation, we can do that as well. But that'll be any kind of additional info there will help, because I think you've seen the theme, and I think Skylar just got it too, right? That there are a lot of variables in play here, and we don't want to send you down a generic rabbit hole that's not gonna that's gonna waste more time than help.
Perfect. And just a reminder that Victoria and Debbie have their emails up on the screen. So you do have those in front of you as well. The next question is, what would you recommend on key steps to adapt this framework to fundraise for not for profits?
So read that again one more time for me, because I was just taking
Yeah,
down some
yeah, no.
notes from it.
Oh, what would you recommend? It says, what would you recommend for key steps to adapt this framework to fundraise for not for profits?
Okay,
So I guess, yeah, do you use it, is there any differences that would be for not-for-profits versus for-profits? Is kind of what it sounds like to me.
completely. So a lot of these tools are audience and also business agnostic. There's something that you would layer on there. So, if you follow the framework, as we were kind of talking through, right? If you know who you want to fundraise, who are going to be your likely donors, right? And this nonprofit, you do feel like you have a differentiated message, because there is a lot of conflicting, similar overlap in the nonprofit space. And then you can leverage these tools for the outreach. How do you keep them top of mind? I would start again with kind of that. I would start small, right? What's your biggest problem that you have right now as that nonprofit, that you're trying to achieve, and see what kind of tool aligns with that. Go ahead and start learning it. And I think the big thing to put out there for everyone is this is a learning curve for everyone, including ourselves. Like, nobody wakes up and they're like, yes, I automatically know how to use all these new AI tools. It's very similar to when, Google came to market and became a major player in the advertising space. That was a new thing. Agencies had to learn it. We've all had to kind of go through it, but it's also exciting because we're evolving through it. But don't feel like you have to be this armchair expert, or you're not even allowed to play with it or find out whether it's helpful or not.
Yeah, I would say, if we look back on our last AI masterclass, like it's laughable because this is all moving so, so fast. And if I
Mhm.
had to leave you with like one comment, like don't be scared. Even though we're
Mhm.
experts to some extent, no one knows what they're doing. Like we are not expert in all 7,000 tools that can
Sure.
be used in marketing. And as long as you're not immediately throwing everything out into the ether to your client base, just try it. Like, it might be horrible, but you'll get better.
Yeah, and I mean, and the reason why, we have the expertise that we do is because we have the opportunity to play with these tools again while we're working with clients, while we're working on different things. And that's what's given us that insight, right? So, Debbie's 100% right.
Yeah.
You're not going to swim across the ocean, if you don't get off the beach. So,
Yeah, and
you
like
have to kind of,
we, for example, work with a large global nonprofit. And that, kind of
Mhm.
looping the two things together. There's a percentage of AI tools coming out every day that are focused and specialized for the NGO nonprofit world, but there's also a huge amount of tools that exist that go across, and you have to just try them.
Okay, awesome. Do you feel like AI will replace the need for a marketing firm?
So great question, fair question. Um, Personally, I do not. And I'm not just saying that because I own a marketing firm. But that would be a good answer, right? If I, just because of that. But really, really kind of getting down to the bones of it. So a big part of marketing is psychology. And the other thing that, we haven't really talked about that AI is not great at doing quite yet by any stretch is understanding to the environment that you're in. So when we talk about our target markets, I'll expand on that because that's probably very vague. But we talk about your target market. If you're talking about, let's say your target market is high school students, and this is what you're going after, this is what you're looking at, this is how you're messaging. But then all of a sudden, God forbid, a school shooting happens. And that's going to change, and again, it might affect your product, it might not, with this target audience, but it should affect your tone. It should affect, how you are communicating. It should affect a level of sensitivity. It should, kind of change. All right, I'm fully aware that they're going through this, or they're reading, AI is taking all their jobs, but I'm a job board. How am I kind of getting into that psychology of it? So there is a big psychological aspect of it, um, that AI completely misses from a marketing perspective. At the same time, and it's fun. And trust me, we test this and it's hilarious. We'll say, write a strategy for this type of company that's doing XYZ that needs to be here by 2027. And it's just so generic textbook that if everybody was doing that, and I actually would love for everybody to be doing the exact same strategy, because then again, we can swoop in and do something very different and capture that entire marketplace. So AI is not smart enough to understand fully, it can tell you if your competitor is making changes. It might be able to understand, what's being said in Reddit, but it's missing out on that big picture that's constantly evolving. It really goes back to that art and science. So if AI is the science piece of it, the marketing art piece really comes from human nature. And in my opinion, it's just not really there yet. And you're going to get you see a lot of generic marketing. We see a lot of generic marketing. I could probably sit with you all day long and play AI bingo, online, whether it's on social or something else. And like, nobody even wrote that. That's an AI tool. This actually looks just like company B's. Now I'm confused. Am I looking at company A or company B? So, my prediction is, will it change the way marketing companies work? Yes. Is it exciting that we can do more? Yes. Can we then, let people be strategic thinking, and then we can automate these time draining tasks? Awesome.
Yeah,
But
it's a little bit like,
I don't
when
think it'll
certain
ever fully
robotics.
replace it. What was
Yeah, it's
that,
a
Debbie?
little bit like when certain robotics went into surgeries, right? Like those surgeons learned how to excel and develop new procedures and add more. And it's great because, the more of the, let's be honest, from my perspective, the more of the lower level execution things that a firm can do, a company can do internally, I would way rather they spend their money on,
Mhm.
paid ad campaigns or a strategy from a marketing agency. So it just shifts what you're spending your money and time on. That's all.
It's an evolution though. It's an evolution. And I know we had some investors on this call. And I know a lot of investors are very interested in how you're using AI internally to reduce your burn rate, to accelerate results and everything else. So I think it's a very, it's a good, fair question to ask. And that's why, that's what kind of prompted us to do the shortcuts, because that's how we kind of see it as, it took me 3 hours to do this in the past. I can do it in 15 minutes. Wow. That is a huge chunk of time I've just gotten back to continue to produce something that is going to, that actually needs my time and doesn't, falls to the end of the pile because you're doing so much busy work. This is great. I know we
Okay.
have 4 minutes left, Skylar, so I don't know if there's any other questions. And
Yes,
again, if you haven't heard us or answered, please email us. I know I'm like beating a dead horse with it, but email us, we're happy to chat.
yes. I was gonna wrap it up here. You guys did awesome. I did want to mention that Buzzy Rocket has a great newsletter. It's really different with no sales. It's called The Lowdown. They send it out every Sunday. I get it every Sunday. It's great. So I think everyone should sign up for that. So what's the best way to sign up for that, Debbie and Victoria, if they're
So
interested?
Skylar, this is hilarious because we did not rehearse this and it's kind of funny. So if you scan that QR code and you put in your name and email, you will get the shortcuts, but we actually will sign you up for the lowdown too. So it's a kind of
Oh,
a
perfect.
double win. You can opt out at any point. We send it once a week. Thank you, Skylar, for the big endorsement.
Of
It's
course.
fun for us to do, and we do get good feedback on it. So we're grateful for that.
Of course. Well, yeah, we love the Buzzy Rocket team, love working with them. Um, like we mentioned, if you have any questions for them, want to reach out, have questions about best platforms, best chat GBT sources to use, whatever you might need, please feel free to email them. Their emails are on the screen. And I know a lot of people had questions about the recording in the deck. We'll make sure to send that out to everyone so that you have it. If you missed any part of this, you can rewatch it, or if you want to rewatch it again to get more insight, feel free to do so. But with that, we can wrap up the meeting today. And Victoria and Debbie, thank you so much. You guys are awesome. And like I
Thank you
mentioned,
guys,
we'll
and thank you for everybody attending. We really appreciate your time. We know it's sparse. Thank you
awesome. Well, thank
again.
you, everyone. We'll see you next time.
All right, bye.